Hi, everyone, and welcome back for another episode of Malice in the Mitten. I am your host, Tracy Preston, along with my bestie, Christine Mulligan. Hey, Christine.
Hey, Trace. What are we getting into today? What are you telling me about? What's happening?
Well, today we're going to go back in time with a story researched and written by Rebecca Hiers. So thank you, Rebecca. Let's get into it. This is Season 6, Episode 22, William Lonsberry. It was January 5th, 1905, when William Lonsberry had a big problem. Two, actually. One was the dead woman lying on his kitchen floor, and the other was his mother. What he would do about his problems and how he got to the point of having the problems was a story that was broadcast nationwide. William Lonsberry was born in New York State in 1849 to William and Mary Lonsberry. His wife, Sarah, was born in England in 1847 to William and Elizabeth Wing. Her family immigrated to America in 1859 when she was just 12 years old. William and Sarah met in New York and married in 1868 when he was 19 and she was 21. Sarah had been married before, but there is no record of her first husband. She did, however, have one son at the time of her marriage to William, and his name was also William. The pair would go on to have 9 additional children, only 6 which would live to adulthood. Shortly after their marriage, the pair moved to Monroe County, Michigan, near Detroit, then to Watertown Township in Clinton County. For many years, William worked hard with Sarah by his side and saved up as much money as he could. He did odd jobs, finding work wherever he could, and finally, in 1881, he was able to purchase 80 acres in Windsor Township near Diamonddale in Eaton County for $600. He later bought another 20 acres, 10 of which he deeded to his son, Herman. It was some of the best land in the township, located about 2.5 miles north of Diamonddale, but the purchase of the additional 20 acres was to be the start of his downfall. The original purchase of 80 acres included a small shed-like home that the family lived in for quite a few years. It was poorly insulated and run down. William built a new home on the same plot of land as the shed house around 1900, but due to the purchase of the additional 20 acres, could not afford the mortgage on the new home. Sarah's father stepped in and paid off the mortgage on the land, putting the deed to the land in Sarah's name, so William could not mortgage it again. The mortgage on the new house was in his name and the payment was coming due. The marriage was already in trouble, with constant fighting between the two, which only intensified after Sarah's father stepped in to save the farm. William believed his name should also be on the deed, but Sarah disagreed. Neighbors would tell of how his poor treatment of Sarah would intensify after this event, and William would claim that she rubbed it in his face that she owned the land they lived on, not him. William was known as a hard worker around Diamonddale, but was also known for his violent mistreatment of his wife and was not well liked due to that fact. It was also well known in the neighborhood that Sarah was prone to leaving after some of their fights, but she always came back. More stress was added in 1903 when William's mother, Mary, moved in with the couple. Mary would later say that Sarah told her, quote, "I hate you because you are his mother." But she would also say, "I loved her like she was my daughter." She was always good to me. The morning of January 5th, 1905, dawned cold and clear and looked like it would be a day like any other. The family arose and went about their daily duties, but before the day was done, Sarah would be dead, and Mary would be a prisoner in the little shed house in back. William returned to the house after doing his farm chores around 11 a.m. He later claimed that his mother and Sarah did not get along, and when he returned to the home, he discovered that Sarah had locked his 78-year-old mother in an upstairs bedroom. He said his mother had hit her head when Sarah threw her into the room. He claimed he came inside to hear his elderly mother crying and screaming, pounding on the door, begging to be released, while his wife just went about her business in the kitchen. William ran upstairs and burst the door down to the room where his mother was held. William then sat on the staircase talking to her for a while in efforts to calm her down. After Mary's anger subsided, he went to confront Sarah. She threw in his face the fact that she owned the land, the house was on her land, and she could do whatever she wanted. Not thinking, he hit her. She fell to the ground, hit her head on the floor, and died. William said his mother came downstairs and the two tried to revive Sarah, but it was too late. She was dead. The two waited until midnight and, for lack of a better burial spot, dug a hole in the floor of the sheep shed and put the body there. Then he sent his mother to her room upstairs, with her later choosing to move to the old shed home. When it was noticed Sarah wasn't around anymore, William told people who asked that Sarah had run away again. And this time, he didn't think she'd be back. That this time she really meant it. She had run away 3 other times after one of their fights. He had no reason to believe this was any different. The neighbors, knowing of the volatile relationship between the two, believed the story. At first, there were rumors he had killed her, but when nobody was found and he acted normal, those rumors were short-lived. He would even go as far as to put an ad in the paper in June of 1905, offering a $100 cash reward for information leading to the return of his wife. In November of 1906, Sarah's son, William, came from where he lived in Iowa to search for his mother. He didn't believe she had run off and cut off contact with all of her children. Sarah and William's son, Floyd, didn't believe this either. Both went to the sheriff, but with no proof, he was unable to act. 6 years later, in July of 1911, a very scared, frail, and timid Mary would have a much different story to tell. Since Sarah's mysterious disappearance in 1905, Mary had been living in the old, worn-down original home on the property. Once a social person, she was withdrawn and never left the shed home. One day, at the beginning of July, she did leave to try and go across the road to visit with a neighbor. William saw her leaving the home, and in the middle of the street, he beat her, choked her, and threw her to the ground, and while she lay there, he tried to pull her tongue out of her mouth. He then picked her up, and pushing her in front of him, he took her back to the shed home. Holy shit. Could you imagine that? Tried to pull her tongue right out of her mouth?
Well, he didn't want her talking. He was beyond the dead.
Yeah, lock it up, woman. Jesus.
He must have really not liked her talking.
Yeah, you bet. I think his story's a little shady. All right. Battered, bruised, worn down, and sore, Mary was truly afraid for her life. William had threatened to kill her before, and it seemed like he may carry through on that threat. The neighbor she was going to visit, as well as some school children, witnessed that abuse. The neighbor confronted him about it. She asked him, "Why would you do something so violent to your own mother?" William replied,
"She wanted to come and see you."
The neighbor responded with, "Well, why not let her come?"
"Well, she talks too much and tells awful lies."
William had been spreading the rumor among the neighbors that his mother was losing her mind, so that if she did manage to talk to a neighbor, anything she said would be dismissed. However, his treatment of Mary in front of witnesses revived the rumors that Sarah had been murdered. If he would treat his own mother this way, with people watching, what might he have done to his wife in the privacy of their own home? Sitting in her rundown home, recovering from her beating, Mary wasn't surprised when Sheriff Donovan came knocking on her door. William, Sarah's son, had come back to town in May, and he and Floyd had visited with the sheriff again. Coupled with the brutal beating the neighbors had witnessed, Sheriff Donovan felt he had a better chance of finding out the truth than he had back in 1906 when William and Floyd had first approached him. At first, Mary, deeply afraid, said nothing. She was now 84 years old. The sheriff brought with him a local priest, and the priest told her that he had known Sarah and knew that she wouldn't just run away, leaving her family behind her. Finally, Mary broke down. Feeling her time on earth was limited, she told the priest she, quote, "didn't want to die with a guilty conscience." She told the following story. On the morning of January 5th, 1905, William had gone to work on the farm. He came back in about 11 a.m. She was in a corner of the kitchen, and she felt maybe he didn't see her there. Sarah and William began fighting over the deed to the house. William was trying to force Sarah to add his name to the deed, but she was resisting. Part of the deal with her father was that she would never add him. She was not about to break that promise. Wow. In a fit of rage, Mary watched, horrified, as William wrapped his fingers around Sarah's neck. She watched as Sarah's body went limp. When she was finally limp, he let go of her, and she fell to the ground, striking her head on a jar that was sitting on the floor. When she was struck with the jar, a large gash formed and blood began to pool on the floor from the wound. Mary ran to the injured girl's side to try and revive her, but it was too late. Either the choking or the head wound had killed her. William looked at Mary and said, quote,
"If you say anything, I will kill you."
He then sent her upstairs. The body lay on the kitchen floor until about midnight, when Mary saw William walking around the farm with lanterns. When she came down the next morning, the body was gone. She wasn't sure what he had done with the body. She thought maybe he had burned it or perhaps put it down the old well, now overgrown. She had tried to take Sarah's place in the home, working as his housekeeper, but she was too old and too frail. When she couldn't keep up with the housework, he banished her to the old home shed and hired a housekeeper. She stated he kept her there, a prisoner for 6 years, threatening to kill her if she ever told or disagreed with him. On approximately the day of July 12th, Mary, still bruised from her beating in the street, tripped over a bucket of raspberries left on the floor. William, seeing the berries spill to the ground, got 3 buckets of cold water from the well. He threw one on Mary, and the force of the water knocking the frail, elderly woman to the ground. As she lay there, he doused her with the other 2 buckets. She lay there shivering for an hour, finally making her way to her bed where she crawled in, trying to get warm. As she lay there, Sheriff Donovan came and arrested William for the murder of his wife. As the sheriff put cuffs on him, William would state that his mother was insane. He would also then add, quote,
"I am undone. My mother is the cause of it all."
He was held without bond until his trial. The sheriff knew that since Sarah had disappeared in January, Sarah's body wouldn't be found in the well, and there was no evidence of burning anywhere on the property. Neighbors had also seen him wandering around the sheep shed with a lantern late at night back in 1905. Being that the ground would have been frozen, he deduced that she would be found in a place where the ground would be protected in January. They began by digging the floor up in the shed Mary had lived in for 6 years. Finding nothing, the search moved to the sheep shed next door. 3 feet under the floor, they found quicklime, bits of cloth, a hand with a plain gold ring, a belt buckle, and a mummified body. A neighbor and former housekeeper to the Lonsberry family, Mrs. Seldens, would identify the ring as Sarah's. Neighbor Viola Cook would identify the body by the hair. A funeral was held for her a few days later, and she was laid to rest at the Wacusta Cemetery in Clinton County. Around July 20th, 1911, William would go in front of the judge and plead guilty to second-degree murder. This was a no-jury trial. A different judge would later say that if he had gone in front of a jury, he would have only been found guilty of manslaughter. He was sentenced in September 1911 to life of hard labor and was sent to Jackson Prison. William, still sticking to the story, kept blaming his mother as they took him away. At the time, William was 63 years old. Sarah's son, William, promised to care for Mary out of the estate. After William was arrested, Mary went to live with Sheriff Barnett in Diamonddale, then later with her grandson Harold and his wife Maud. Harold, along with 2 of his brothers, had backed his father, stating Sarah often flew at William in a rage and that their father killed her in self-defense. They also stated Mary was insane and had made up the story. Life was miserable for her there. Sarah and William's daughters never spoke with or corresponded with William after his arrest. In March of 1912, Judge Dan would declare Mary mentally insane and sentence her to live at the Kalamazoo Insane Asylum. Before she could be moved there, she had a stroke and was paralyzed. She was moved to the home of the Raleigh family in Potterville to recover, and she would die there on May 2nd, 1912. She was laid to rest at the Wacusta Cemetery also. In 1919, the Lonsberry boys would petition the courts for their father's release. They were not successful, and William died at Jackson Prison on June 5th, 1925. He was also buried in the Wacusta Cemetery next to the woman he murdered in cold blood 20 years before. The murder of Sarah and the trial wasn't the only bad news for the Lonsberry family that year. William and Sarah's son, Leslie, was arrested in August of 1911 for stealing journals and brass fittings from the Grand Trunk Railroad where he was employed. He would steal small pieces of brass and load them onto a velocipede and take them into town. Now, a velocipede is an early form of a bicycle where the pedals were on the large front wheel and one small wheel in back. So he couldn't take much at a time. He was eventually convicted of stealing over 8,000 pounds of brass. Well, that's a lot of trips on that bike.
One bracket at a time. I think that's the craziest part of this whole story.
All right, so back to this thieving kid, right? 8,000 pounds of brass. That's nuts. I can't even imagine, like, if you're taking one little piece of brass, he must have been quite fit riding that bike back and forth. That's all I gotta say. All right.
Yeah, and those weren't easy to ride with that big wheel. They're very wobbly. When I see pictures of that, I'm like, I wish they had movie cameras back then, because I really want to see them riding on dirt roads with this big tire.
Yeah, I want to see that. I want to see that shit in action, man.
Yeah. All right, so one brass knuckle at a time, he's riding away on his little crazy bike. Yeah. And what happens?
All right. So, he would sell all that to this guy named Mr. S.J. Moore, who in turn was funded by Mr. I.P. Garber. Now, all three men were charged with grand larceny and also sent to prison for the crime. Leslie would commit suicide in 1928, and he too was buried at the Wacusta Cemetery. So they're all buried together. That's a nutty story.
Oh, wow. Families that kill and steal together get buried together.
That's right. All at the Wacusta Cemetery.
Oh, it's crazy.
Well, thank you everyone for listening. And if you found the story interesting and would like to hear more Michigan Malice, please click that like and share button down below. And thank you as always for listening. We appreciate you spending some time with us. So thanks again, everyone. Have a great week. And we will see you back on Wednesday for Round Robin. Have a great week, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.